All right, Rabbi, say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors. So thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Cheshvan, Stephen Terry Zinn, for dedicating all the Shur and Drushos this month in memory of Steve's father, Bunim Tzvi Ben Chaim, on the occasion of his 18th yahrzeit. To thank Leah Sol for dedicating all the Shur and Drushos this month. This is Chusra for Shalema for her daughter, Ilana Bas Esther, and an emerita for Shalema for all those wounded in Eretz Yisrael. To thank Rachel Wolf for dedicating the Shur Drushos this month, for a complete and lasting refuah shlema for Rafa'al Yitzchak Baruch Ben Esther, Jerry and Sarah Wolaski in the Schusar refuah shlema for their grandson Zachariah Dov Ben Perel Shira, and Azriel and Iris Miller in the Schus of the Holy Soldiers of the IDF, and in the merit of our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisrael. Our week of learning sponsors, Joel Hasner, and thanks to the members of the Israel Defense Forces who need our support at this time. Incredible. All right, with that, let us begin. In Meretz Hashem, we have a beautiful, beautiful daf ahead of us today, and of course, even aside from all the sponsorships, we always dedicate each and every letter of our learning. In the schus of our holy soldiers, they should be successful in all of their missions, and in the schus of our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisrael, they should have the strength, fortitude, hope, and optimism to weather the days ahead. Jose, so we are beginning today's daf is Samech Vav 66, and we are actually picking up. We made good headway yesterday. We're picking up towards the bottom of the daf. Amra Abaye. So it's 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 lines up from the bottom. So if you remember again, just to reorient ourselves, we're actually still focused on a simple question, which is what happens if a person does Kiddushin with an Eid Echad? Right? In other words, so Reuven and Rachel get married. They get married in the presence of a one Eid. So you have two people saying we are married. That's the statement of the husband, quote unquote, the husband and wife is backed up by an Eid Echad. So what's the impact? What's the impact? Does that work or not? So remember, we've gone on quite a journey. Remember, just to point out, Rav Yehuda was of the opinion on Amud Aleph that Yehuda said that Allah in Choshishin, an Eid Echad, even if you have husband and wife both agreeing that they are married, the testimony of an Eid Echad is absolutely irrelevant, does not affect true Kiddushin. So we've had quite a journey in trying to figure out if that's true, not true. We're continuing with that now. Amr Abaye. This is an interesting case. Amr lo Eid Echad achalta chelev. Listen to this. An Eid Echad comes over to Reuven. He says, Reuven, you ate chelev. Chelev is forbidden fat. You ate chelev. V'hala shosek. And Reuven is quiet. Reuven doesn't say anything. So what's the halacha? Ne'eman. The Eid Echad ultimately again is believed, and therefore again Reuven will have chelev liability. Okay, v'tanatuna, we also learned. Amr lo Eid Echad achalta chelev, v'alo amr lo achalti pater. So let's listen to this. So on the other hand, there's a second case. An Eid Echad comes and says, Reuven, you ate chelev. Reuven says, no, I didn't. So what's the halacha? Pater. Now, time of the Amr lo. The reason why Reuven is pater in that second case is why? Because he contradicted the Eid Echad. Ha-ishtek, but you see that had Reuven remained silent, mehamin, ultimately the Eid Echad would be believed. So we'll say, what do you see from here? What do you see? You see that halacha l'maisa, that an Eid Echad is believed when there is the consent of the other parties involved. Rabbi, another case, Rabbi, Amar lo Eid Echad says to Reuven, nitmu tarasecha. Ultimately, again, your produce, which is tar, which is ritually pure, became tameh. V'ala shosek, and Reuven doesn't say anything when confronted with this Eid Echad, ne'aman. Ultimately, the Eid Echad is believed. Eid Echad is believed. V'tanatuna, Eid Echad omer nitmu. If an Eid Echad says your taras became tameh, v'hala omer, and Reuven says lo nitmu. No, they didn't become tameh. So what's the halacha? Pater. Reuven ultimately will be pater. Now, what do you see from here? Time of the Amr lo. The reason why the Eid Echad is contradicted, or the reason why ultimately the Eid Echad is not believed, is because Reuven contradicts him. Ha-ishtek, but had Reuven remained silent, mehamin, ultimately the Eid Echad would be believed. So we'll say you begin to see a pattern in each. So case number one, right? Eid Echad is coming over to Reuven, says, Reuven, you ate chelev. If Reuven doesn't say anything, if Reuven doesn't contradict the Eid Echad, then ultimately again the Eid Echad is believed. Reuven, your taras, right? Your ritually pure produce became tameh. If Reuven doesn't contradict him, then ultimately again the Eid Echad is believed. Now, obviously, if Reuven contradicts the Eid Echad, fine. So the Eid Echad is no more powerful than Reuven himself. Vamra Abaye says, Amar Eid Echad, and Eid Echad says, what's the top of Samech Vav, 66a, Sharcha Nirva, right? Let's say, and we'll say that his ox was sodomized. Right, this ox was a victim of bestiality. Now we'll say, now what's the impact? What's the impact of that on the animal? So Rashi points out over here, va'asr lahakrava. So essentially, what the Eid Echad is saying is, Reuven, your ox is no longer fit to be offered up as a karban. V'hala shosek, and Reuven doesn't say anything. Ne'eman, ultimately the Eid Echad is believed. V'tanatuna, v'shenev da ba'avera, v'shehemis al pi Eid Echad, o al pi abaylim. Ne'eman, we'll say similarly again, if we know that an Avera was committed with this ox, or the ox killed someone, but only based on the testimony of an Eid Echad, or ultimately again based on the admission of the owners himself, Ne'aman, to which the Gemara says, Hai api Eid Echad, hechidami. What is the case of Eid Echad that we just referred to over here? Either kamodu bailim, if the owner of the ox, if the owner himself admits that ultimately again the ox did what he claimed to do, or ultimately again was the victim, so hainu api abailim, then that's the same thing as the admission of the owners. Elalav deshasik, rather it must be a case where ultimately again the Eid Echad gives information, Reuven doesn't contradict it, and what? The testimony of the Eid Echad is believed. So therefore I will say, what comes out is we have essentially three different cases, right? Case number one, Reuven Ye'et Chelev. Case number two, your produce became ritually impure. Case number three, your ox was the victim of bestiality. Now we'll say so now what happens? Halacha l'maisa in all of these cases, if Reuven doesn't contradict the Eid Echad is believed. So we'll say, bottom line, what do you see from here? That when the parties involved don't contradict the Eid Echad, the testimony of the Eid Echad is meaningful. Circling back, this would seem to prove, this would seem to contradict, Rabbi Yehuda's point, right? Because Rabbi Yehuda wanted to say, Reuven and Rachel claim that they're married, right? That statement is backed up by an Eid Echad. Rabbi Yehuda said that's meaningless. But here we seem to see that a testimony of an Eid Echad is meaningful. Now, before we get to that, we'll say, why do you need three cases that all highlight the same concept? Right? In other words, all three of these, obviously there are three different cases, one dealing ultimately again with Chelev, one dealing with Taras, and one dealing with the status of an animal, but Lamaisa, it's all the same principle. So why do you need to illustrate the same principle in three different ways? I'll tell you, how do we just said the first case of Taros, right? That's the case we'll say where again, Eid Echad comes to Chelev. Reuven, you ate Chelev. Reuven Ye'et Chelev. Say if you would, and Reuven was silent. If Reuven is silent, ultimately again there's liability. So if you would have just said that case, so the Gemara says, Ilav dekimle benafshei David chulin ba'azara lo hava maisi. So we'll say, see in the case of Chelev, what's the liability for Chelev? You have to bring a karban. So we'll say, so the truth is when the Eid Echad says Reuven you ate Chelev, and Reuven is silent, had Reuven not been 100% sure that the Eid Echad was correct, he would have never remained silent. Why? Because I will say, Reuven would not want to bring a karban to the Beis HaMikdash if he wasn't obligated to do so. That is called chulin ba'azara. We spent a long time speaking about chulin ba'azara. So therefore, again, it must be in that case, Reuven's silence is because he knows for sure that the Eid Echad is correct. Aval, nitmu tarosecha. But in the case where the Eid Echad comes along and says, Reuven, your produce became ritually impure. So meimar amiran, hay deshasek t'savar chazilei b'mei tumaso. Maybe I will say the reason why Reuven is silent in that case is why? Because he says to himself, who cares? Who cares if my produce became ritually impure? So fine, I won't eat it during days that I'm tahar. I'll only eat it during days that I'm tameh. As I will say, remember again, most people, right, you had food, and times in the Beis HaMikdash, where we had Tuman Tar, it's interesting, right, you had food that you would eat when you were tar, and you would have food that you would eat when you were tameh. So what happens when the Eid Echad comes along, and says that Reuven, your taros, your ritually pure food became tameh, and Reuven's silent. Silence doesn't mean that he's agreeing. I will say, silence just means he's going along with it. I will say an incredible Musar Haskell. sometimes it's not worth the argument. Right? In other words, sometimes in life, even if you happen to know that what the person is saying is incorrect, or what the person is saying is flawed, you don't always have to be right. There are some people that always feel the need to be right, and therefore always have to argue every single point. And they get mired in arguments that are just of absolutely no consequence. Sometimes, just let it go. Just let it go. So the Gemara is suggesting over here, so Eid Echad comes, Ruvain, your produce is tamei. Ruvain's like, whatever, it doesn't, he might know, no it's not, but what am I going to do? I'm going to get into it with the Eid Echad? So fine, you want to say it's tamei, no problem. I'm tamei, I was going to say, I'm tamei most of the time anyway, which doesn't sound right. But right, you say in other words, I'm tamei anyway at times, so now this food will be set aside for when I'm tamei. That's it. That's it. So the silence doesn't necessarily mean acquiescence. And if you were to just tell me the Tara's case, I would say, so no, maybe if it were just in the Tara's case, I would have said that when Reuven is silent, maybe in that case silence really does mean acquiescence, because the Eid Echad is really depriving him of something, which is depriving him of the ability to consume his produce when he is tahar. Aval shoro nirva, I will say when the Eid Echad comes along and says that your ox was sodomized, so I will say, so maybe the reason why Reuven doesn't contradict him is why? Amar, kol hashvarim lavagad mizbeach kaimi. I was about to say, interestingly enough, remember, as we said before, what's the impact of the Eid Echad's testimony that Reuven's ox was sodomized? What's the impact of that? You can't offer it up as a carbon. Okay. I was also say, it doesn't preclude me from using the animal for work. It doesn't preclude me from shechting it and using it for food. So the Maisa, I would say, generally, like when you have a herd, right? What percentage of that herd is sacrificially designated? So B'Pashtos, the answer is low. It's a low percentage. So fine, I can't use this animal as a carbon, not a big deal. Once again, I will say, so his silence is not necessarily demonstrative of acquiescence. His silence may be demonstrative of, it's just not worth the fight. It's just not worth anything. Therefore, again, Sricha. Therefore, I will say, you need all three cases. Why? Because by including all three cases, the point that the Gemara is trying to make over here is silence is acquiescence. That's the point. That when Eid Echad comes along and says something, and we'll call it the Bailim, the Bailim, don't say anything, don't contradict, but are simply silent in the face of the Eid Echad, halacha l'maisa, that is acquiescence. That is acquiescence. And I will say again, what you begin to see from here is that halacha l'maisa, so an Eid Echad does have power. An Eid Echad does have power. Now, again, is this... The question we're going to have to grapple with is, so now we've demonstrated that an Eid Echad does have power to affect legal realities. And by the way, we knew that already, right? We know. Where do we know that from? We know the concept of Eid Echad Ne'eman Bi'isurin. We have this concept, right, that one witness is believed in matters of Isra, matters of prohibition, right? And Eid Echad comes along and says, that piece of meat is chaylev, he's believed. He's believed, right? This is why, for example, again, a woman is hilchos nida, right? A woman is believed to say she's a nida, she's not a nida. 1 second, it's an isser. What? Maybe you should have independent corroboration, independent edus. No, Eid Echad ne'eman bi'isurin. The question just is, when do we apply the credibility? In what cases do we extend the credibility of an Eid Echad to? That's really the fundamental question that we're grappling with over here. Okay, so listen to this. This is a fascinating case. Ibaylahu. Ishto zinsa be'eid echad. Listen to this, I will say. So an Eid Echad comes over to Reuven. He says, Reuven, your wife committed adultery. Your wife committed adultery. What happens? For show's sake, Reuven is silent. Reuven is silent in the face of the testimony of the Eid Echad. So Reuven says, now what's the shayla? Mahu. So again, I will say now here again the stakes are much higher because the shayla is, remember, if a woman commits adultery, she is prohibited to her husband. So the shayla over here is Reuven confronted with this information by an Eid Echad. Reuven himself quiet, doesn't say anything. What is the impact on the marriage? Amar Abaye, Abaye says, Ne'eman. Ultimately, again, the Eid Echad is believed. Wow. Rava Amar Eino Ne'eman. Rava says, no, the Eid Echad is not believed. Have davar shebe'erva. Rava say this is a matter of immorality, or immorality. Ve'in davar shebe'erva pachos mishnayim. And Rava say whenever it comes to matters of morality always require the testimony of two witnesses. Rava say, where do we know that from? We just had this. Gezeira Shava, davar mimamon. One of those Shas concepts you have to remember, right? Davar Darman, it says davar by erva, kimatza ba ervas davar, that's by erva, and apishna edim yakum davar. So davar, just like you need two witnesses by monetary matters, you also need two witnesses ultimately again by matters of morality. So therefore Rava says, not believed. Amar Abai says, Minaminallah. So Abai says, Abai says, okay, so where do I know that an Eid Echad is believed in this case? So Abai says, so remember again, this is pretty dramatic, because Abai is saying, Eid Echad shows up, tells Reuven, your wife committed adultery, ultimately again, now she, and Reuven doesn't contradict. Rabbi say, just to be clear, remember, if Eid Echad were to come and say, Reuven, your wife committed adultery, and Reuven said, no, she didn't. What's the halacha? She did. So, done, right? In other words, Reuven has the ability to contradict the Eid Echad. What's happening over here, and this is the theme, is silence. Silence in the face of the testimony of an Eid Echad. So Abaye says, if Reuven is silent, that means ultimately, again, the testimony of the Eid Echad is accepted, and halacha l'maisa, she is asura. Rachel is asura to Reuven. Now watch this. Amar Abaye says, Minaminallah. But it's incredible. Abaye says, from where do I know that silence in the face of the Eid Echad is acceptance of his testimony? Listen to this. So I'll say there was a particular man, he was blind. He used to arrange the teachings in the presence of Mar Shmuel. So Mar Shmuel would go ahead and deliver teachings, right, to deliver halachas, and this guy would be like the organizer. He'd be the sheer note taker. He'd be the organizer. Okay, what happened? Yom Echad nagale v'lo hava ka'asi. One day, this guy, the blind guy, right, the blind note organizer, was late. He didn't come to Beis Medrash. So Shatar Shlicha Abasrei. So Mar Shmuel sent someone from the Beis Medrash to go find this guy. To go find him. So what happens? Ada azul shliach bechada orcha. So what ended up happening is, so the blind guy was just running late. See, he was on his way to the Beis Medrash. He took one path, and the shaliach took a different path. So they missed each other. I will say, now the part of the story that's not written was, so the shaliach ended up going to the blind man's house. Right? And when he got to the blind man's house, apparently he saw that the blind man's wife was with another man, that she had committed adultery. Okay, so Kiyasa, he comes to the Beis Medrash, so the Shaliach, right, comes back to the Beis Medrash, and he tells the blind man, Amar Ishta Zinsa. Says to the blind man, I saw that your wife committed adultery. Your wife committed adultery. Asla committed Mar Shmuel. So the blind man comes before Mar Shmuel. Amar Le, so he says Mar Shmuel, like, what do I do? So like what's the halacha in this case? So listen to this. Amar Le, imehemen lecha zil afka. If you believe this shaliach, if you believe the Eid Echad, then ultimately divorce your wife. V'ilo, but if you don't believe the Eid Echad, lo safik, then don't divorce your wife. Then don't divorce your wife. So Abaye says, what do you see from here? That an Eid Echad does have credibility. Now, interestingly enough, it seems to be like subjective credibility, which is, if you believe him, then ultimately, again, his words are powerful. So the Gemara says, "My lav id mehemen aloch delav gazlano." Now, we'll say, what does this mean? If you believe the Eid Echad, what does that mean? So, Bepashtus, doesn't it mean that if you believe that he's credible, in other words, he's not a ganav? In other words, we'll say, remember, someone who's a ganav, someone who's a thief, doesn't have halachic credibility. So when Mar Shmuel said to the shaliach, if you believe him, doesn't that mean stam? Like, if you believe that he has credibility, he's not a ganav, then ultimately divorce your wife. So the Gemara says, my love, imehemen alach lav gazlanu. But Rava would say, no, that's not what it means. Imehemen lecha kibeitrei zil afka v'ilo lo safka. Rava would say, no. What Mar Shmuel was saying was, if this guy is so credible to you that his word is like two witnesses, then divorce your wife. But if it's not like two witnesses, i.e., it's only like one witness, then this is not actionable testimony. So I will say, so therefore again, just to show what's happening over here. So remember, we have now an Eid Echad showing up telling Ruvain, your wife Rachel committed adultery. Ruvain is silent. He doesn't know to accept the contradiction. He just doesn't know. So what's the impact of that? So once again, Abaye says the Eid Echad is believed. Now, interestingly enough, where did Abaye glean his position? Apparently from this story of Mar Shmuel. Right, that seems to be the basis for his position. That Mar Shmuel said to the blind man, if you believe this Eid Echad, then ultimately again divorce your wife. So Abai, you see from here, the testimony of an uncontested Eid Echad is actionable. Rava says, what are you talking about? Rava says this is a Davar Sheba Erva. Whenever it comes to a Davar Sheba Erva, we have Gzir Shavav Davar Mi Mamon. Just like Mamon, monetary matters need two witnesses, so too again, morality matters require two witnesses as well. Abai says, Mina Minallah. So Abai says, okay, so Abai once again tries to prove his position that both say, this is an incredible story. Incredible story. A little, it's not a garata, it's just an incredible story. The Sanya. Maisa biyanai hamelech. There was a story with King Yanai. That I will say, who was King Yanai? Rashi says over Yanai Hamelech mina kohanim shel chashmonaim hava. So it's a Yanai was one of the Hasmonean kings, right? This is in the aftermath of the Hanukkah story. So just a piece of history over here. So remember again, the Chashmonai family were the heroes of the Hanukkah story. They were Kohanim. After they won the battle against the Syrian Greeks and regained Jewish autonomy during the times of the second Beis Hamikdash, so they did something very interesting, which is they also took monarchy. There's an interesting machlokus between the Ramban and the Rambam as to whether or not that was the right move to seize the monarchy. One opinion says their goal was to consolidate power. There was such anarchy that their goal was to create a consolidation ultimately of power. Another opinion says no, it was a terrible mistake. The way that Judaism is set up is that there is a defined split between political leadership and between religious leadership. Religious leadership comes from Shevet Levi. Right? That's kahuna. Political leadership comes from Shevet Yehuda, that's monarchy, that's Davidic line. So so it's an interesting machlokes. So in general, the Hasmonean monarchical line did not end well. Remember again, I will say, what happens to the Malchus of the Chashmonai? What happens to the Chashmonai monarchical line? What happens to them? Remember, they're wiped out ultimately by Herod. Right, Hordus was the one who claimed that he was the last of the Chashmonai kings. He wasn't the Chashmonai king at all. He was a slave. But Lamaisa, again, they're ultimately wiped out. Okay, so in any event, this is Yanai. So watch this. So Amrabai. So Maisa bi Yanai Hamelech. Shahalach lekuchlis shiva midbar. So he waged a battle. He waged a military campaign. The kivesh sham shishim krachim. But say he waged a successful military campaign, and Baruch Hashem he captured 60 cities. Incredible. When he came back, obviously Baruch Hashem, there was great celebration. And he called again. Right, this is when Yanai was good. This is when Yanai was righteous. So Yanai wanted to celebrate this incredible accomplishment together with all of the Chachamim. So Amar Lahem, he said, Avosenu haya ochlim meluchim bizman shaya oskim bizman beis hamikdash. Our forefathers ate meluchim. I will say, what's meluchim? Look at Rashi. Meluchim. Rashi says, Yurakos heim v'shemen kakuli b'lashon arami. So I will say, listen to this. Our forefathers, when they were building the Beis Hamikdash, all they ate were essentially like pickled vegetables, right? Now, why did all they eat was salted vegetables? Well, look, it's incredible. Look at Rashi. Kishay asukim bebinyan, bayesheni, shebal min agola, v'hayu aniyim, v'hayu motziin hotzaos b'malacha. Af anu nochal meluchin lios zecher laoni avosenu ulahodos l'tnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu shetzlichinu ve'eshinu. This is so beautiful. This is when our forefathers came back to rebuild the second Beis Hamikdash. It's incredible. They essentially donated all of their money to building the Beis Hamikdash, to building the house of Hashem. And so all they had was some money left over just for very simple food. for very simple food. He says, Af anu nocha maluchim zecher lavosenu. This is beautiful. He says, let us remember that which our forefathers did. So we'll say, it's such a beautiful moment. What Yanai was doing was saying, look how far we have come. Right? Our forefathers gave up pretty much all of their disposable income to be able to build the house of the Ribono Shel Olam. And all they ate was some salted vegetables. So let's eat salted vegetables as well. Let's remember their Mesiras Nefesh. I'll say, but what did they do? So I'll say, this is incredibly important, how in general, in times of accomplishment, it's always important, especially like as a people, it's always important to recognize any accomplishment we have as a nation always comes on the shoulders of those who came before us. Any accomplishment we have, the path to accomplishment is paved by the Mesiras Nefesh, the incredible self-sacrifice of those who came before us. So here Yanai is saying, as we celebrate this incredible military victory, let's remember that the path to this victory was paved by those who came before us. So what did they do? This is incredible. They ate salted vegetables on golden tables. So the contrast is pretty incredible. Let's remember what our forefathers ate, and we're eating it now on gold tables. That's how successful we are. It's such a beautiful image. So what happened? V'hayasham echad. There was the guy there. Ish Leitz. He was a letz. Right? I must say, how do you translate a letz? A clown, right? But like someone. The whole idea. Actually, we saw this in Shari Tshuva, the whole idea of and also in Chovos HaLevavos, Shar B'Tachon, the whole idea of Leitzanas, Rabbi say is and Mesiras Yesharim, right? Leitzanas means you take nothing seriously. Everything is a joke, and when you take nothing seriously, I will say it's the worst kind of midah. So Leiv Ra, a person with a bad heart, Ubilial. I say Bilial means Biliol. He just a person without the yoke of HaKadosh Baruch Hu on him. And what was his name? Elazar ben Po'ira Shmo. His name was Elazar. Elazar ben Po'ira. Vayomer Elazar ben Po'ira liYanai HaMelech. So Elazar ben Po'ira said to Yanai HaMelech, Yanai HaMelech, Libam shal prushim alecha. He says the heart of the Chachamim is not really with you. So listen to this. So this guy, it's so sad. Elazar ben Po'ira, both say, is just trying to poison the well. He's just trying to poison the well. That's literally, so he goes over to Yanai and says, Yanai, you think the rabbis support you, the Chachamim support you? They don't support you. Both say, the Chachamim were called the Prushim. The Prushim, right? The Prushim were the people, right? Parush literally means separate, someone who's separate in order to maintain the ways of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what they called the Chum. It's called, let's say, the Tzdukim, right? The Tzdukim were the people who only believed in Torah Shebechsab, not Torah Shebal Peh. So he says, the Prushim, the Rabbanim, they are not really with you. So Yanai listens, Uma Esa. So Yanai says, so what should I do? Or how should I tell? How could I tell if you're right or not? So this guy Elazar says, Hekim lahem b'tzitz shebenenecha. Put on the tzitz. I was saying, now what's the tzitz? The tzitz is the plate that goes on the forehead of the Kohen Gadol. Of the Kohen Gadol that says Kodesh LaHashem. So essentially what Elazar ben Po'ira says to Yanai, here's how you could test their allegiance. Essentially, anoint yourself as Kohen Gadol. Put on the tzitz in front of them and see what their reaction is. So Hekim lehem b'tzitz shebenenav. So okay, Yanai, listen. I will say it's incredible, right? It's incredible. You see from here how dangerous it is to lack self-confidence. See, I will say this is a study in a lack of self-confidence. When you don't believe in yourself, anyone or anything that chirps in your ear, you go with it. Right, this is a story of Achashverosh Lahavdil. Right, this is a story. It's incredible. You would think that great people who accomplish great things ultimately should go ahead and have confidence to do what is right. But sometimes you're supposed to say, you know what ends up happening? You know what happens with power? With power, it's an amazing thing. Great people, when they rise to levels of power, so when they're not as great, they're totally focused on helping their constituency. When they become great and ascend to power, you know what it becomes all about? It's all about what? Maintaining power. And when everything is about maintaining power, so someone chirps in your ear, someone doesn't support you, you react. I see they will say, that's the difference. That's the difference. When a leader is focused on maintaining power, all he wants to do is make sure he could curry favor with whoever is around him. When a leader wants to do good by his constituency, it doesn't really, this famous Chassam Sofer. Chassam Sofer is talking to a group of Rabbanim. He says, any Rav who is beloved by everyone is not doing his job. Right? And he says, any Rav who's despised by everyone is not a mensch. But he says, so that's somewhere in the middle, right? If everybody likes you, chances are you're not accomplishing anything, right? Part of being in a leadership position is being disliked by some segment of the population. So it's incredible. So this guy chirps in Yanai's ear, and Yanai totally reacts, right? Hey, it's so the man Yanai just conquered 60 cities. You're doing a good job, right? Ride the wave of success. But once you become so hyper-focused on maintaining power, you're just willing to listen to it. So he puts on the tzitz. So all the Rabbanim are there. Hayasham Zakin Echad Yehuda ben Gedidya, or Gedidei Shmo. So there was a particular Zakin, a particular Rav there, and his name was Yehuda ben Gedida. Vayomer Yehuda ben Gedida Yanai Melech, Rav Lach Keser Malchus, Hanach Keser Kahuna Lazaro Shel Aaron. Okay, so he said this might not have been the best way to say this, but he says like this. He says, Yanai, you already have the crown of the monarchy. Leave the crown of the Kahuna Gedola to the offspring of Aaron. Now, I will say, that was a loaded statement. Because had he just said, you have the crown of the monarchy, don't take the crown of the Kahuna also. Leave Kahuna Gedola for someone else. But essentially what he said to Yanai was, you're not really a fit Kohen. Okay, why? Because I will say there was an account that said that Yanai's mother was taken captive before he was born in the town of Modi'im. So therefore I will say, remember again, the halacha assumes when a woman is taken captive, she's violated. So there were concerns that maybe Yanai is a halal. Or not a Kohen, something that somehow his yichus was somewhat tainted. So this, we'll say, so first of all, not really a good move, right? Not a good move, and this is in public, by the way, right? All this happening in public. So again, had this statement just be the king, don't worry about being the Kohen Gadol, okay. But now, essentially in public, what you're doing is you're going ahead and you're essentially casting aspersions on the king's yichus. And I will say, now, interestingly enough, it happens to be, this was a rumor, right? This was discussed about having happened to Yanai's mother. They researched it, and there was no proof to that ever occurred. So in other words, here Yehuda ben Gedida was bringing up something that was never really substantiated. So as one could imagine, Yanai is angry. He separated himself ultimately again from the Rabbanim in anger. So now Yanai is angry. Well, there's so many lessons, right? So many lessons. Yehuda ben Gedida, come on, right? Measure your words a little bit more carefully, right? Think about what you're going to say, especially when you're saying it in public. Be a bit more thoughtful in what you're going to deliver and how you're going to deliver it. So obviously, Yanai's angry. So what happens? So this guy, now I will say, here's what's incredible also. Why is Elazar ben Po'ira doing this? Right? Why is he doing this? Why is he trying to poison the well? So again, we don't know. The Gemara doesn't tell us why that is. So what happens? But he's not finished. Yanai Melech. Hedyot shebi Yisrael kachu dina, va'ata melech v'kohen gadol kachu dina. So now Elizabeth Ben Bira says, Yanai. If a regular commoner was publicly humiliated, that's one thing. But Yanai, you're the king and you're the kohen gadol. You cannot allow this public humiliation to go without repercussion. So Yanai says, Ma'asa, what should I do? So Elizabeth Ben says, well, again, who am I? But if you're asking me, imata shomea le'eitzasi romsam, kill all of the chachamim. kill all the Chacham. This is wild. This is wild. Elazar here, literally again, he has the ear of the king. Yanai, again I will say, this is what happens when you lack self-confidence and all you're worried about is keeping power and not doing good. Yanai is listening, right? Yanai is like Kichomer Biyat HaYotzer. He's like clay in Elazar ben Po'ira's hand. If you listen to me, I will say, by the way, this is Achashverosh and Haman. This is the same, it's the same story. It's the same exact narrative. So Elazar says, you know what, if you listen to me, kill them. Kill them. I see, Yana says, kill them. The Torah Mate'alel, we'll say, what's going to happen to Torah? In other words, Yanai understood that Chachamim also are the purveyors, are the conveyors of Torah. So what happens if I kill the Chachamim? So Allah's Rebbe says, don't worry about it. Hare krucha umunachas b'keren zavis. Don't worry about it. Torah's right over there. Right? In other words, he pointed to a Torah scroll. It's rolled up in the corner. It's right there. Kalarotze lilmod yavo v'yilmod. Nothing's going to happen to Torah, right? Torah is right there. Whoever wants to learn it, they could come and learn it. Come and learn it. We'll say, in the midst of this terrible story, I just want to point out what a profound statement, right? Hare krucha umunachos b'keren zavis. I will say Torah is accessible to us whenever we want it. It's rolled up, it's sitting there in the corner, and it is waiting. It is waiting to be learned by us. Kalarotze lilmod yavo v'yilmod. Whoever wants it, come and get it. What a muskah. We sometimes think that ultimately, again, Torah is so far from us. Torah is so difficult for us. Remember again the words of Moshe Rabbeinu, Lo b'shamayim hi. Torah is not in the heavens. So we'll say, if Torah is not in the heavens, where is it? It's right in the corner. It's right there. It's right there. If you want it, you have to say, now here's the difference. When it comes to Torah, you know what's not going to happen? You know what's not going to happen? Torah is not coming to you. That's the difference, right? Torah is not walking over to you, but Torah is in the corner of every single room that you ever inhabit. It's rolled up, waiting there. If you want it, it is there for the taking. Okay, incredible. Just an incredible positive message in the midst of this. So you got Elazar ben Po'ira saying to Yanai, wipe out the Chachamim. Miyad Nizraka Ba'api Karsa. So we'll say now, what ends up happening is, at this point in this, see, up until now in the story, Yanai was listening, but still he wasn't 100% convinced that what Elazar ben Po'ira was telling him was correct. I will say, in this moment, there was a shift, right? And Yanai is seized by a wave of apikarsus. The Havilei Lemei Martinuch Torah Shebichsav, Torah Shebalpeh, Mai. So we'll say, because Yanai should have said, Elazar ben Po'ira, come on, you know better than that. A Torah scroll by itself is helpful to a certain degree, right? But Torah Shebichsav without Torah Shebalpeh, you can't do anything with it. Who is the key? Who is the key to Torah Shebalpeh? The Chachamim. So while it's true that if you kill out the Chachamim, ultimately again the Torah scroll itself is still sitting there in the corner waiting to be learned, but without the Chachamim, how can you decode it? How can you understand it? So we'll say, so what happened? So the Gemara says, Miyad vatotzei tzara idea Elazar ben Po'ira ve'yahargu kol chachmei Yisrael. What a tragic story. What a tragic story, I will say. So at the end of the day, what happened? So at the end of the day, Elazar ben Po'ira got the ear ultimately again of Yanai, and Yanai killed out all of the sages. All of the sages. V'haya ola mishtomim. I will say the world was desolate. I will say, I point out there's a lot of parallels to different stories over here. V'haya ola mishtomim is the same lashon the Gemara uses in Yevamis on Samech Beis when it talks about the story of the death of Rabbi Akiva's students. Right? Rabbi Akiva loses the 24,000 students. 24,000 students, and the Gemara says, "V'haya olam shamim." The world was desolate. I will say, without Talmidei Chachamim, the world is empty, because Talmidei Chachamim ultimately again who perpetuate the light of Torah. So now again, the world, there was literally an existential threat to the continuity of the Jewish people. Ad sheba Shimon ben Shetach vehechser es Torah liyoshna. Until Shimon ben Shetach, interestingly enough, Shimon ben Shetach was Yanai's brother-in-law. So how did he survive the massacre of the Rabbanim? Because listen to this, Yanai's own wife, Shimon ben Shetach's sister, hid her brother, Shimon ben Shetach. Sorry, did I say it the other wrong way? Right? So Yanai's wife, Shimon ben Shetach's sister. Right? Yanai's wife, Shimon Shetach's sister. Ultimately, again, Rashi says, over Shimon Shetach, Achi Ishto Haya. Right? He was the brother of Yanai's wife. Ultimately, and she hid him. She hit him. So we'll say, it's just incredible, right? So ultimately, again, so Torah survives through. So Yanai wipes out Torah, and it's Yanai's own wife, ultimately, again, who ensures the continuity of Torah. The Hechzir as a Torah Lioshna, and ultimately, in Shimon Shetach, he returns the Torah to its former place. So we'll say Shimon ben Shetach rebuilds everything. He rebuilds everything. So I will say, I just want to point out something absolutely, dramatically, tragically amazing. I will say, if you notice, by the way, remember again, the second Beis Hamikdash, who was instrumental in ensuring its destruction? Right? You remember again? Oh my gosh. No, but the story. Kamsa Bar Kamsa, right? So again, I will say, there, ultimately again, you have Bar Kamsa and Zechariah ben Avkulus, right? Here, it's ultimately again, this individual, Elazar ben Poira. I will say, the most important thing for our people to always remember, I will say, is that at the end of the day, our enemies aren't the Caesar and aren't Haman, or Hamas, or Hezbollah. Those enemies we can always conquer. The enemies who do the worst damage to Klal Yisrael is ourselves. We are always the key. Let's say someone, just to illustrate this, and it's happening already. Somebody sent me an article yesterday from Tablet Magazine about how right now every Jew is at fault for hiding behind the concept of pikuach nefesh. That we think that Israel should have a green light to go ahead and do whatever it has to do because of pikuach nefesh. Who says our pikuach nefesh is more important than anyone else's pikuach nefesh? It's incredible. 11 days. What day of the war is it now? 11 days, and already again the breaks in the unity. And the world sees this. The world will pick up on this. And as time goes on, more and more, it's so important to learn the lessons of history. When we are not united with each other, that is when the greatest amount of damage happens to us. That is when the greatest amount of damage. When we are together, when we are b'yachad, and both say, and remember, sometimes what does achdus mean? Achdus means that what you do, we spoke of this before, you value unity over personal agenda. So what achdus means, you both say, if everyone agrees on everything, then achdus is easy, right? The reason why achdus is complicated is because what achdus means is, I disagree with you, and I disagree with you in a very significant way. But I feel that our ability to be united is more important than our disagreements on very important issues. So what I'm willing to do is I'm willing to either agree or set aside certain things because the national unity is what I prize most and what matters most. It's very difficult. We spoke about this before. It's very difficult because to put aside your personal agendas and your personal beliefs for the sake of some higher form of unity is the hardest thing in the world. But that is the secret to our success. And unfortunately, the inability to do that paves the way, chas v'shalom rachmana litzlan, for our own undoing. It's not some Gentile external force that gets Yanai's ear. It's Elazar ben Poira. It's not someone who gets the Caesar's ear. It's Bar Kamsa. It's such an incredible and overwhelming yesod that we have yet to learn over 2,000. Because we'll say, now we ride a beautiful wave of Jewish unity. It shouldn't take a massacre. It shouldn't take a pogrom for Jews to be united. All it should take is a brief study in Jewish history for us to understand what happens to us when we don't have achdus, to recognize that we need to put achdus above all else. Nothing matters more than achdus. Whatever disagreements you have to set aside, but it's hard. Let's say it's hard, right? We know it's hard. It's hard to set aside your own personal agenda for the sake of some greater goal of national unity. But until we learn that lesson, we will keep encountering challenge after challenge after challenge. Halavai. Let's say, you know what I hope more than anything in this current situation? I hope more than anything that maybe this is the turning point for Klal Yisrael. maybe this is it. Maybe this is the event. In other words, maybe what we see is in retrospect that when our leaders in Eretz Yisrael squabble like children, each of them advocating for their own little bucket of stuff they want, setting aside the national good for personal good. And maybe when we see that when Jews fight with each other in Dizengoff on Yom Kippur, right, we see it paves the way for horrific tragedies in Klal Yisrael. Maybe this is a turning point for us. Maybe it is. And now, the chesed you see, the chesed you will say, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I mean, ridiculously amazing. The achdus, everything. So that's what I hope more than anything that comes out of this. That maybe this is the tipping point for Klal Yisrael. We saw such divisiveness and such selfish behavior. Maybe this is the tipping point where we recognize we don't have the luxury of not having achdus. That's what I sincerely hope, and I think what all of us hope comes out of this. We know that Eretz Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Medinas Yisrael, will be successful in our endeavors. The question is what happens after the success. Do we hold on to the achdus, or do we lapse back into our previous ways? That's the part that I tell you, that's the part that makes me most fearful, that when the dust settles, does everybody just simply retreat back into their corner? Or do we hold on to the beautiful national bonds of unity that have been created during this difficult time? Halavai should be the latter. We'll say, let's go right there. So what happens? I was doing so well. Okay. All right, fine. Sorry. So I say, Hechidami. So now remember, this was a great story. But like, why is this here? Now we'll say, now watch this. Hechidami. Now, I just want to point out, you know why this entire story was brought up? This is incredible. The entire story was brought up just because of this detail of Yanai's mother being taken captive. That's why the story is there, right? So remember again, this sage Yehuda ben Gedidei, right? When Yanai shows up with the tzitz, so what happens is, don't do that, you're not Kohen Gadol. Why? Because remember again, your mother was taken captive in Modi'im. So the Gemara says, well, what's that story? Now remember, the Gemara says they investigated that story, and it wasn't a credible story. So the Gemara says, what was the story? What was the story? Hechidam ilema to beitrei amri ishtabai or beitrei amri lo ishtabai. So we'll say if it was a case, ultimately again, where two witnesses say that she was taken captive, the mother, and two witnesses she was taken captive. My chazes samchasani samechahani. We'll say if it's 2 versus 2, then at the end of the day, they cancel each other out, and therefore we have no testimony that she was taken captive. Ella be'ed echad. Rather, must have said that there was one witness who said that she was taken captive. The time of the kamachashile beitrei. Now, ultimately, again, so there was an Eid Echad who said that she was taken captive, and there were 2 witnesses who said she wasn't taken captive, and that's why, again, the story was found not to be credible. Now, halav hachi mehemin. Now, the Abayi will say, now the reason why the Eid Echad isn't believed, why Abayi says why? Why? Because he was contradicted by 2 witnesses. Well, what do you see from here? That if the Eid Echad wasn't contradicted by 2 witnesses, then what? He would be believed. So you see from here that an uncontested Eid Echad is believed. So this is Abayi's proof. So Rava will say, no. Li'olam treu trei. It's not true. In fact, the story with Yanai's mother was there were 2 competing sets of witnesses. Ukeda amar Rav Acha bar Rav min Yomi be'edei hazama. We'll say, what are we talking about over here? We're talking about the case where 2 witnesses say that Yanai's mother was taken captive. Another 2 witnesses show up and say, they don't say the opposite. They just say about the first witnesses, you could not have seen that. Why? Imana Yusim, you were with us. So there's no way that you saw what you claim you saw. So that ultimately there was an entire plan to get Yanai's mother out. Ultimately, again, they substituted her with another woman. They put a slave in there instead. So fine. So let's say, so bottom line is Yanai's mother ultimately again was not the woman taken captive. So we'll say, so remember, the whole reason this fascinating story was brought down is because Abaye wanted to use it as a proof that you see that an uncontested Eid Echad ultimately again could be believed, but Lamaisa it is not a good proof. Amar Rava. So Rava says as follows. We'll say Amar Beis. Mina minallah. From where do I know that ultimately again an Eid Echad is not believed ultimately again in a Devar Erva? How do I know that? Even if he's not contested. This none. Amar Rabbi Shimon Ma'aseh b'Megura shel Diskim b'Yavna. So let's listen to this. There was a story of a Megura shel Diskim. Now we'll say, now what's the case over here? This is talking about a body of water, like a pool of water, a mikvah. There was a pool of water, a mikvah in Yavne. Shaisa omedes becheskas shlema. Now, let's remember again, a mikvah is that 40 sa'ah. So they had measured the mikvah at some point in time, and it had 40 sa'ah. Now, what happens? Umadadu v'nimtzas chasera. They will say they measured it then at some later time, and they found it didn't have 40 sa'ah. But at 39 saw, Rabbi says, now obviously what's going to be the shaila? The shaila is, Rabbi says, so what do you do? So imagine for a moment, let's say on Rosh Chodesh Cheshvan, they built the mikvah, they measured it 40 saw. And then on Rosh Chodesh Kislev, they measure it again, it only has 38 saw. So of course now the shaila is, what about everything in between? So what's the halacha? So called taros shenasu agaba. So we'll say anything that was purified using that mikvah. Hayir Rabbi Tarfon matar. Rabbi Tarfon said it's tar. Rabbi Tarfon says, essentially, we only assume the mikvah became deficient when? At the time you measured it, now the second time. But beforehand it has a cheskas kashrus, and therefore anything or anyone that used that mikvah is presumed to be tar. Rabbi Akiva metame. Rabbi Akiva said no, it's tameh. So Rabbi Akiva says that halacha l'maisa, we don't know when. Here's what we know: the mikvah became deficient. We don't know when the mikvah became deficient. So essentially, you have to back up the suffix deficiency all the way back to Rosh Chodesh Cheshvan. Right, so maybe it was kosher, for a moment afterwards, but after that you have to assume that it was deficient going forward. So we'll say, so incredible. So according to Rabbi Akiva, anything done during the month of Cheshvan is going to have to be retoveld. According to Rabbi Tarfon, anything done during Cheshvan is just fine. It's only this point and on that the mikvah is unusable. Rabbi Tarfon says, Rabbi Tarfon, mikvah ze becheskas shalim hu omeid misafik ata balachas al tachsrei misafik. So Rabbi Tarfon says, no, the mikvah is a cheskas kashrus. Cheskas kashrus. Okay, so now on Rosh Chodesh Kislev, when you measure it again, it no longer has a cheskas kashrus. Fine. So going forward, it's not going to be usable. But why would you erode the cheskas kashrus retroactively? Misafek. Rabbi Akiva. Adam zeh becheskas tameyu omeid misafek atabalatara atara misafek. Rabbi Akiva says, but one second. What about the person who immersed in it? Right. So the person who immersed in it during the month of Cheshvan, he has a cheskas tamei. Now, both say his chazaka is that he's tamei. Based on a suffix mikvah kasher, you're going to retire him. So we'll say it's interesting. So Rabbi Tarfon looks at this from the vantage point of the mikvah. Rabbi Akiva looks at this from the vantage point of the person. So Rabbi Tarfon says the mikvah has a cheskas kashrus, and therefore again there's no reason to erode the cheskas kashrus misafek. Rabbi Akiva says the person has a cheskas tuma. Right, the only way to undo the cheskas tuma is through a vadai mikvah, and you don't have a vadai mikvah. Incredible. Rabbi Tarfon, mashallah omedu makrav agabe. This is very interesting. Rabbi Tarfon says, I'm going to give you a mashal. What's the mashal? To a Kohen who's standing by the Mizbeach. V'noda shu ben grusha ben chalutza. Now, let's imagine the following scene. Right, you have a Kohen who's standing by. He's in the basement. He's doing the avoda. Right, he gets a text message. Right, an alert. By the way, you're a ben grusha ben chalutza. Right, bad news. Right, bad news. So Rabbi says, now what's the shaila? Sha'avodaso kshera. Rabbi says the halacha is Rabbi says, here's what's interesting. Let's say you have Aaron a Kohen. Aaron finds out that his mother is a grusha. There's a mother grusha. So fine, obviously he can't do any avoda going forward. What about the avoda he's done up until now? So Rabbi says the halacha is any avoda he's done up until this point is kosher. It's kosher. So Rabbi Tarfon says, what do you see from here? That when you have something that has a cheskas kashrus, but then the chazaka changes, the chazaka only changes mikana la'aba going forward, but doesn't have an impact on anything retroactively. Rabbi Akiva will say, one second. Mashallah omedu makrav agabe mizbeach. I'll give you a different case. Rabbi Akiva says, to a Kohen sitting and offering on the mizbeach, v'noda shu bal mum. Wow, watch this. Let's say if Kohen finds out he's a Baal Mum. Now, what does it mean he finds out he's a Baal Mum? He just discovered the Mum. Now, it could be able to say that ultimately he had a Mum that no one knew about, right? And he just found out that Mum that he has is actually a disqualifying Mum. What's the halacha? Sha'avodaso psula. So we'll say anything that he has done even retroactively is not good. So Rabbi Akiva says, you see from here that Allah Chalamaysa, when you have a change of chazaka, it impacts retroactively. So we'll say, so fascinating, right? So Rabbi Tarfon is bringing a raya from Ben Grusha Ben Chalutza. Kohen finds out that he's the son of a Grusha, son of a Chalutza. So again, that changes his chazaka going forward, doesn't impact retroactively. Therefore, again, Rabbi Tarfon wants to say, same thing, we find out the mikvah is not kosher, that impacts going forward, doesn't impact retroactively. Rabbi Akiva, Kohen who finds out he's a Baal Mum, that impacts even retroactively. So too, again, you find out that the mikvah is not kosher, impacts even retroactively. So I'm Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Tarfon says, Ato demisula Baal Mum, you're comparing the mikvah to a Kohen who's a Baal Mum, Vani demisula ben Grusha ben Chalutza. Nira lemi doma. Let's see who's right. I doma ben Grusha ben Chalutza, nidonenu ben Grusha ben Chalutza. If a mikvah is like a ben Grusha ben Chalutza, let's treat it accordingly. And therefore say that halacha l'maisa, it's only impacted going forward. Im doma leBaal Mum, nidonenu keBaal Mum. Ultimately, again, if you want to compare it to a Baal Mum, let's compare it to a Baal Mum and pasa attractive. All right, so we'll stop over here for today. We're going to pick up this kind of mid-discussion, dramatic discussion, Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Tarfon. We'll be fine. Tomorrow, Miras Hashem, all right, we'll be fine. We'll be fine. I'll say, I'm just don't look at on the base. I'll say, shkoyach, we always catch up. Shkoyach, I'll say, beautiful daf today, incredible. Have a great day, everyone.
Some Harrison's thought that they finally figured it out.